Okay, so till now we have finished the 12 verses of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. Now we come to verse number 13. It's one of the most common verse that is quoted whenever the topic of meditation comes in Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because Lord Krishna, in all his mercy, has even given us the instruction of how to sit for meditation. So, the verse is pretty important. Samakaya shirogrivam dharayan achalam sthira samprekshya nasikagram svam disha cha anavalokayan. So, what does it say? It's an instruction of how to hold your body when you are doing meditation. Now, Patanjali tells us sthira and sukha, steady and comfortable. Krishna goes one step further and tells us holding the body, head, neck erect and still, looking fixed at the tip of his nose without looking around. So, this is the verse. Holding the back, head and neck evenly steady, motionless. Erect, not lying down. So spine should be straight, and spine at all levels should be straight. Okay, not only thoracic spine and then upper spine like this or like this. So head, body, back, head and neck erect and still. Because you can move also, like we do in joint mobilization. Looking fixed at the tip of his nose without looking around. This is how we should sit. Okay, so these are basic instructions of how one must sit, but I will add to those instructions with due permission from Sri Krishna. Sit on the sit bones. So when you sit on your sit bones, it is assured that your SI joint and your lumbar spine is held correctly. If you are sitting on a sit bones and if your lower back is not straight, you are like this, then raise the seat a slightly higher. As it is, remember in the earlier verse, he has told us slightly higher, not too high. Don't sit on a chair with folded legs. You can sit on a chair. It's too high from Bhagavad Gita point of view, but if you sit on the chair, keep your feet firmly grounded. But if your back is not straight, you can sit on a pillow or a cushion, but see to it that your spine is held straight. Now, once your spine is held straight, you rotate your shoulder blades and open the chest as much as you can, and gently place your hands on the knees. You can place your hands like this, or you can place your hands anyway in mudra. Mudras have not been mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. So he has not gone in micro details because it depends. Some people like it like this, some people like it like this, some people like it like this. But it should not be like this. Let not mudra divert your attention. I have seen many people, they will sit in meditation like this. There's so much strain. Remember, I will tell you one secret of meditative posture. In meditative posture, the biomechanics of your body should be so perfectly aligned that other muscles don't have to compensate and there is no energy loss. Why this is important? Because in meditation, our whole idea is to reduce the metabolic rate. Higher states of meditation, cultivation of samadhi is exactly like hibernation that the animals go through. Exactly like that. It is like that. It is. In fact, there are some studies which say that the impulse of hibernation is so deep in our system that when a yogi goes in samadhi, it actually brings up that impulse of hibernation, like the bears and others. No? But what will the bears or some other animals do? They will eat, stock the food in their system as adipose tissue or fat tissue, and then go in hibernation. But a yogi doesn't do that. Why? Because yogis' nadis, astral tubes, channels, are so open and clean that even in the state of hibernation, the prana is still flowing and keeping the body and metabolic functions slightly alive. That's another level of meditation. But coming back to how to keep your back straight, let's not talk about what happens in that state. In fact, just going off topic, in Tibetan Tantra there is a mudra called Tukdam. In Tukdam, if you see, it's something like this. If you see a monk, an advanced master, meditating in Tukdam, even when you don't see any metabolic signs, you don't bury or cremate that monk. You just store him. That means he will come out of that state whenever, don't know when. So just since we are discussing mudra, I am telling you this. So say the monk goes in meditation like this. And then the body will degenerate. And the monk will become after 1 year like this. 1 year means he's still in meditation 1 year. And then no metabolic signs. So then they store. Why? Because the mudra is Tukdam. That means it's an instruction of the master. Don't do anything to body. I will return in the same way. So these are advanced states of meditation. But we'll discuss some day over a cup of coffee or tea. Right now, how to hold our spine straight. Okay, now we did that. Spine is straight. Sit. For our modern humans, either sit on the chair or sit on a meditative cushion. Because it's very, very rare that you will find somebody who can sit on the floor with proper leg alignment and not destroy their knees after a few years. Okay, and no need of doing that. Then one instruction that Krishna doesn't give, but Jnaneshwar gives very beautifully. And Jnaneshwar was a saint in 13th century in India. And what he did was, he was a Hatha yogi. And he made Bhagavad Gita even simpler for the general population. So basically Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses. He elaborated it to 9,000 verses. So imagine. At what age 15. At the age of 15, he started giving commentary on Gita, and there was one of his students who was writing at the age of 15. So you can imagine. And he went into Samadhi at the age of 21. He said, my work in this life is over. And then he was, they made a cave for him. He went into the cave and whatever, did his further practices or whatever. We don't know what he did. Okay. So the reason I appreciate him because I love his work and he's a personal inspiration for me. But more importantly, I have a bias towards saints who work for masses. Personal bias. And this person, Jnaneshwar, he was the second child in 4 children, and they were from a high caste family, but because of some reasons which I will not get into now, they were ostracized. You understand what is ostracized means? Thrown out of their caste, and they were very, very heavily abused mentally, physically by the high caste Brahmins. Brahmin is the high caste, the priest class. So much so that his elder brother Nivrittinath, who was also a Hatha Yogi, and he, Jnaneshwar, and the other siblings took it upon them to take the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, which were limited only to educated upper class people, to the masses. So he has simplified. If you read his Bhagavad Gita, 9,000 verses, there is so much story, there is so much poem. So he has elaborated on this verse, and in that, so it's also a master's commentary. In fact, Jnaneshwar is known as an avatar or incarnation of Krishna. So we would not be wrong to treat his commentary as much with respect as original Bhagavad Gita. In his commentary, Jnaneshwar says that the eyes should shut. I'll tell you how they should shut. He says that the lower lids should stay relaxed and the upper eyelids should slowly shut. In such a way, if you really do that, if you really relax your eyes and allow the upper eyelid to gently relax, your eyes will not close. Means your eyes will not shut completely. For example, if I ask you to shut your eyes, you will shut like this. Now when you shut your eyes, if you feel the ocular muscles around your eyes, you will realize a little tension. Now try to shut your eyes without actually holding the muscles tight. What do? You allow the upper eyelids to slowly drop like a curtain. And a time will come when your eyes are closed, but there is a gap. There is a small gap between upper and lower eyelids. You can actually see a little bit outwardly, but you will feel your eyes are completely relaxed. That's why many people, when they sleep, have you seen even babies, small babies, when they are fast asleep, their eyes are slightly open, because that's exactly. And then though it's it's scary when you see their eyeballs moving. Have you seen it? That when the REM is happening, it's scary. And then if you see when the person is in the deep sleep state, both the eyeballs will go and meet at the third eye. Observe somebody who is sleeping. Observe somebody who is sleeping. In the dream state, their rapid eye movement will be happening. Eyeballs will be moving like this. But in the deep sleep state, eyeballs will go and lock themselves in a position. So this is the way in which your eyes will be shut. Not like this, but Watch like this. That's it. Now for me, there's absolutely no tension in my eyes. Absolutely. The upper eyelids have closed as much as they know. Lower eyelids are steady. And there is a small gap. I can see only my hands. I cannot see all of you. That's it. Try. Try this. It's very relaxing. There will be no tension in your eyes. Okay? Now, could you see in front of you? You could see the floor. Right? You cannot see in the front, but you could see down. Now, this is why, now, you want to close that also. You want to not give senses that much opening also. So, that's why it is written, see. Resolute yogi fixes his gaze on the tip of his nose, not looking around. Otherwise, you're like, even in the little gap, the mind wants to see what is happening. You see how meticulously it is written. We are closing all the gaps. Don't give any chance to the eyes. Why the eyes are so important? Because it is one of the strongest sense organ. After closing the eyes, is your meditation guaranteed? No. Because even if you close your eyes, you see many pictures, no? So then why to close the eyes? In fact, there is a meditation in Tibetan Buddhism where the monks keep their eyes open. In Zen also. In Zen there is a white wall meditation, the scariest meditation. I've done it with some students and very scary. You sit in front of the wall, 1 foot in front, and just keep staring at the wall for one hour. And the things that will happen to you, closed meditations will not do it. She has done it. Especially people with claustrophobia. Mind will imagine such things, it's crazy. Nothing, your eyes are open, everything is open, everything, all senses are open, but you're just staring at the wall. And mind will show you such pictures. So that is the next, this is called Indriya. Indriya means what? It's not just sense, this is the equipment, then the organ, then the mind. This is just the opening. It's like a can, no? This is a can. This is the opening of the can. And then the actual sensory input. That's why when you are sleeping, your eyes are closed, but you see a whole movie as your dream, no? Where are those images coming from? They are imprinted. So this is just like bare beginning to close your eyes. Why is not said put your fingers in your ears? That way, we are not some Hydra or somebody that you block everything. No, it is understood that the yogi will go in a quiet place. It is already mentioned before. Go to a quiet place. Alone. So sense of touch, not there. Alone means nobody's touching you or coming and jumping on your back when you are meditating like we do at home. Silent place means nose, ears, gone. Of course, you are not eating popcorn and meditating, so your sense of taste is also gone. Now the only thing is eyes, and eyes are shut. Okay. Also, eyes connote vision. eye, the whole eye, no, as an object, connotes drishti. Drishti means vision. So when the whole act of shutting your eyes means inwardly gaze. You are changing perspective from external objectivity to internal. And there's a beautiful verse in Bible for this. In Gospel of Matthew chapter 6 verse 22. Christ says, the light of the body is the eye. Eye, not iPhone. Light of the body is eye, E-Y-E. If therefore your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. See, you should know how to interpret this. The light of the body is the eye. Means what? The vision. Not literally eye. So don't go and pluck one eye and say, now my eye is one. If therefore, thine, your eye be single, means what? Focused vision. Not on some object or candle, not tratak. Focused vision of the path. This is what Christ is saying. Forget all distractions. Focus your vision on one single objective, that is your spiritual goal. And then what will happen? Then your whole body shall be full of light. See? Such exactly similar verses. But not many people know how to interpret them and teach them. From Bible also. They will teach something, this verse something horribly. Okay? So, remember always, back straight. Krishna is so merciful, he has not told you, hey, sit only on the floor. Don't sit on the chair. No. He said, as far as your back is straight, you can sit on the chair also. He has not said it, but it's assumed. That's why don't sit on sofa and meditate like this. Then you are not. Nice couch and meditation, no. Now you can do mindfulness exercises, some hearing visualization. But then, why? From the Hatha Yoga point of view, why do we do that? Because the Kundalini is always trying to come up. You see now, please understand this. See, there is no mention of Kundalini in Bhagavad Gita. But still, Krishna gives the instruction keeping in mind the Kundalini rise. This means what? Everybody has the knowledge of Kundalini, means all masters. No matter how you have realized, you will have awareness of Kundalini and chakras. But it is an esoteric knowledge, so they don't talk about it. But basic instruction has been given by Krishna. He did not say, but Jnaneshwar elaborates on it. On this verse, Jnaneshwar has written many verses. Because he was a Hatha Yogi, so he wrote about how Kundalini comes on when it is. Krishna did not. So is this clear? Back straight, eyes relaxed, and vision focused. That is the only prerequisite to the sitting position of meditation. Next verse. Verse number 14. Now, only this much? Then your meditation is done? No. So, what is the next point? What do we do next? Prashantatma vigatabhir brahmacharya vratasthita manah Sanyamya machitto yukta asita matparaha. Serene and fearless. Body, now we held the body straight. Now how to hold the mind? Because meditation is going beyond the mind. So now Krishna is saying how to go at the level of mind. So what to do with the mind? Hold serene and fearless, firm in the vow of celibacy, subdued in mind. Let him sit harmonized, his mind turned to me and intent on me alone. Now many commentators will say, Krishna was so egotistical, every time he's saying me, 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 me. But look, even if that self-realized person is without ego, linguistically to establish a context, they have to use you and me, no? Well, people are really, some people, they just analyze things where they exactly should not analyze. But we know me means what? Divinity. Me means divine. So whatever, you can call it divine, true self, inner light, whatever you are associated with. Now the interesting part is, Krishna says me. Why Krishna says me to Arjuna? Because Arjuna is Krishna's disciple and Krishna is Arjuna's guru. So it is very natural that Krishna will tell Arjuna to think of him. He doesn't say think of your father or no. You think of somebody who is highly motivational to you and you have deep faith. So Krishna was that to Arjuna, not because of egotistical reasons. So you all think of anybody that is spiritually motivating for you and somebody who you trust. These 2 points, please remember. Not just spiritually motivational. Why? Because there are so many people. Oh, should I take Gandhi? Should I take Krishna? Should I take... so then January, Krishna, February, Jesus, March, Mother Mary. No. Take one and stick to one. Please. But there are so many, and this has happened so many times, people ask this question. But there are so many inspirational people. Of course, there are so many, but you need one. You need one, whichever. So you take time and you ask yourself, which one? So not just inspirational, but inspiration plus faith. That is Guru. Just inspiration is not enough. Faith should be there. Okay? So what is he saying? See, number 1. Serene and fearless. Fearless. See what adjective Krishna has used. Why he had choice of so many words, but he used 2. Serene. Okay, we know serene. Once in a while we are serene, so we know. Fearless. Why has Krishna used the word fearless? Because as we discussed in the morning and yesterday, exploration of inner world will come with lot of surprises. It will. Because like I said in the morning, you are not just going inside you. You are going like a flashback they show in the movie, no? Literally you are going through all the past lives you have lived. All. And how many? I can't even tell you. Okay, if you don't believe in past life theory, then still there are so many impressions since the time you were in your mother's womb. I mean, to clear the impressions that you were in mother's womb itself will take one lifetime. Coming out is another avenue. Yeah, the kind of things that your mother exposed you to unknowingly, itself you are still paying the karma. Everybody's mother. Huh? So not just your mother, so then think of your mother. Everybody's mother. Yeah, even physically they say, no, physiologically. Your mother is smoking, the child is coughing inside. So, Yeah. Hmm? Fearless. And this is very, very important. Fearlessness as a virtue has been elaborated in every scripture. Of course, I will give Bible reference too. So, Bible reference if you want. Matthew chapter 10. I told you to read chapter 10. Huh? Matthew chapter 10 verse 26. A beautiful this sentence is. Fear not, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed. Fear not, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed. Means what? Everything will be revealed. You have to face it. You like it, you don't like it. The only way out is through, and you have to go through it. This is spiritual path. As they say, no, there's very, very nice line. The journey from the mind to the heart. Shortest distance, longest journey, or longest time, something like that. Another verse from Matthew, chapter 8, verse 26. Oh, this is good. Both are 26. Chapter 8 and chapter 10. Beautiful verse. Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Ye means it's King James Version, so ye. Okay. Why are you fearful, you people, faithless ones? Jesus says, when the storm comes, when they are Sea of Galilee, they are waiting there, and storm comes, and Jesus is sleeping. One of his Maya, one of his games, I'm sure. He's sleeping, and everybody's worried. Now what will happen? Wake him up, wake him up. We are drowning, we are drowning. Wake him. So then they wake him up. So he says, what? They say, look, it's storm, we are going to drown. So instead of saying, oh, good, good, now I'll do my magic, things like that. Jesus says, you think I was really asleep? Do you really think I can't handle this even in my sleep state? Oh, ye of little faith. And Jesus has said this many times in the Bible. Oh, ye of little faith. Oh, faithless ones. Like those people in Sodom and Gomorrah are better than you. They had no one to trust, so they had no faith. Valid. But you have somebody to trust and still you have no faith. You are worse than them. That's his comparison. Even in one Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, it says, Nayanatmanam balahinena labhyo. It's a very powerful line. Means, the Atma, the true self, can never be reached by the one who is fearful. Again and again, again and again, again and again, the scriptures across the board have told us that if you want to venture inside, into the inner world, you have to gather courage. And that courage will come from two things. Number one, faith, and number two, practice. Practice. In fact, faith is also an output of practice. Trial and error. Many times yoga teachers who are starting off, they will ask me, oh, but now I have only 3 students since last 2 months. It's not building up. It's not building up. Please realize, our job as yoga teachers is a job of generating trust. We are not some computer programmer or something that you just make a program and give it and you get money, bye-bye. No. We are yoga teachers and our main business is generation of trust. And generation of trust will take time. And I guarantee you, people who trust you, they will stick with you. Unless you screw it somewhere. But they will stick with you. And this is how it is, right? This is like in any profession. Family doctors. Your father went to your current doctor's father. His father went to his father. Family doctors. There's a tradition of family doctors. Why? The family doctors knows all your history, disease history, your father how he died, your mother how she died, how your great grandfather died. We are in a business of trust as yoga teachers, so don't rush. It's better to have 4 students who trust you and follow your guidance rather than have 100 students and you don't see them the next time. Have you ever taught in a 5-star hotel? Because I think Kirsten was used to think. Remember? I mean, not remember as in, I'm not asking you to remember, but you told me, and this was exactly my experience when I was teaching in a 5-star hotel in Bombay. Every day new guests. So every class some strange person. They will do and you see their motivation. They just want to stretch and go. So then I told the manager. Then he made me teach in the serviced apartments where there were long-term guests. And that I liked. Why? Because same students and you see them developing, then they trusting, then they bringing their friends. Right? So faith and practice are 2 essential things on the path of spirituality. So he is saying, serene and fearless, firm in the vow of celibacy. The most hot topic in yoga world. Brahmacharya. What is Brahmacharya? Some people argue it's celibacy. Some people argue, no, it's just walking on the path. I'll tell you both. It is both actually. You can take it however you want. But one thing is for sure. If you want to start inward journey, this celibacy doesn't only mean sexuality. Celibacy or sexuality in every religion is linked to attachment to objectivity. Understand that. Don't just look at it from a sex point of view or from a love making point of view and things like that. It's not just basal. Wherever you see celibacy or refrainment from sexuality, it means not just from the sexual point of view but sensory point of view. Why it needs to be done that way? I am not saying completely abolish, because your sexuality can also become a need. Your sexuality can also become a field for drama creation. In relationships, power game. It happens. Power game, drama, then one partner wants to have sex, other partner doesn't want to have sex that day, so then huge conflict. Huge, which lasts, and then what? This conflict is pulled out from the memory next time. Last time also, you see, whenever I want, you don't. So, you are at the same level like coffee. Exactly. I told you to buy coffee, you did not buy coffee. Exactly. So your sex organ is the 6th sense organ, you can say that. And just like every organ, sense organ, sex organ will also be drawn into the drama. And this is why celibacy. Again, for householders, the definition of celibacy is different. So don't, now what? Not like this. For householders, celibacy means, please, only with your partner. No, really, this is the definition of celibacy. Otherwise, everybody will be frustrated, It's important for that energy to come out. Otherwise, it builds up in some other strange way, as in repression. So for householders, celibacy means single-minded focus, not splurging everywhere. No, really, it is. No? So, but also in that, you see that single-minded focus will also be big drama creation. So you see that your sexuality in your relationship is dramaless. At least try to create that. It's a good exercise for the partners. And it can, if sexuality is one common variable that you can work on, lots of variables will adjust. That's another topic for another workshop. I'm not going in detail, but it is interesting. It is important. It is interesting. Remember, whenever those who are there in the evolution of love, when we spoke about chakras, we saw, having sex with your partner from first chakra, from second chakra, from third chakra. So from the first chakra you are in fear, so you are needy. Then your partner is third chakra power, and you have sex. It will be a power game. So the first chakra individual is controlling the power person by feeding into the need, and the other person is getting addicted out of the need. It's different. It's all mental game. It's nothing to do with the organ then. It's all mind manipulation. Just like coffee. No, I am trying to bring it at the same level as sensory. Okay, so he is saying serene, fearless, firm in the vow. That's why it's a vow of celibacy. Means promise. So whatever it is, your vow of celibacy can be whatever. You decide. Clarity. Okay, only with my wife, only with my husband. So then stick to that vow. And after that, subdued in the mind. You see. See, so intelligently he is blocked all loopholes. Because you will say, celibacy, you will get repression. No, I should not look at the opposite sex. No, don't touch me. That's why subdued in the mind. If you are repressed, you will never be subdued in the mind. You will never be subdued in the mind if you are repressed. And after all this, what happens? Let him sit. Now get your ass on the chair, please. So that's what he's saying. Let him sit, harmonized, his mind turned on to me. So finish with all the other games and plays and indulgences and fix your mind on me, intent on me alone. Alone, only me. Single-minded focus. And this is why I read you that the verse of I, E-Y-E. Last verse, not over, last verse. Yunjannevam sadatmanam yogi niyatmanasaha shantim nirvana parama matsamstham adigacchati. The yogi of subdued mind, ever keeping himself harmonized attains to peace, the supreme nirvana, which abides in me. So after doing all this, what happens? Applying himself unceasingly with disciplined mind, the yogi attains peace because he is established in the divinity, which leads to final liberation. Now, a few clarifications here. The yogi of subdued mind, ever keeping himself harmonized. Do you see the word sada? For some reason, that word has not come in the translation below. Do you see the word sada? Sada. Underline that. Uninterruptedly. He has not put that word down in the chorus. This is very important. Uninterruptedly is important. Don't meditate once a year. Uninterruptedly denotes what? Abhyasa. From Abhyasa and Vairagya. Abhyasa means disciplined practice every day. And what is the discipline, definition of discipline according to Patanjali? Write it down. Continuous uninterrupted, continuous, uninterrupted, sincere practice. Continuous, uninterrupted, sincere practice. And this is the definition of discipline. Discipline is a very, very dangerous word in modern yoga, because whenever you talk of discipline, people will think of what you call that, force, oppression. For some reason, I don't know why, disciplined is always connoted as that. He's a very disciplined person. That means a teacher is shouting at you, forcing you. No. Discipline is, in spirituality, is purely internal. Purely internal. Purely internal. You have to start with discipline. You have to start. Somewhere you have to regulate yourself. But later on, that discipline becomes joy. Means first 2-3 years, you will struggle with meditation. Sometimes you will forget it. Sometimes you will skip it. But afterwards, after 2 years, after 3 years, you want to meditate. Wherever you are, doesn't matter. You want to just close your eyes and be calm and serene. And this uninterruptedly is a very, very important point. So, verse number 15, once again, he is saying, the yogi of subdued mind, ever keeping himself harmonized, attains to peace, the supreme nirvana, which abides in me. So simple. In 3 verses, he has told us how we can reach nirvana. Isn't it? Simple. Sit with back straight, close your eyes, shut your senses, focus on me, that's it. Fast forward few lifetimes, smooth arrival. VIP lounge of heaven. Welcomed personally by God. Imagine God standing giving you welcome drink. Hello, welcome to heaven. You are 10,000 years late, but still welcome. Okay, so we will only do 15 verses today. My target is to do 15 every day. So we finish our 47 verses. There are 47 verses, relatively small chapter. You are lucky I didn't choose the second chapter. Second chapter is more than 60 verses. And it is very confusing. Why? Because second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is summary of the whole Gita. So here at least we are still in one line. In second chapter, the Sankhya Yoga is basically summary, because that was a style of writing. You start with the summary. So those who don't understand, just drop the book there itself. Really. If you see Patanjali Yoga Sutra, first 4 lines will show the essence of the book. If you don't understand what is Chitta Vritti, forget it. Next, I will read it after 20 years. Okay, so what we will do now is, remember we are in our silence, first day. First day it's all nice and sweet and exciting, but then the silence starts hitting you, and then the silence starts doing its job, like medicine. When you take the pill, it's all nice. Then the medicine starts working. And it will work in many different ways. I told you, silence is like a mirror. It will show you what you should be seeing. If you feel lonely, you need to address your issue of loneliness. If you are missing family, friends, this, that, or your mobile phone, internet, whatever it is, then you need to work on your attachment to that. If you are feeling claustrophobic, where am I, middle of nowhere, then you need to work on. Whatever you are struggling with, work on that. If you are getting bored, oh, it's just the first day, 4 more days, oh my God, work on that. Expectations, oh, this is something completely different. Work on that. It'll just show you the mirror. It's beautiful. Silence is beautiful. Just show you the mirror. Imagine, Krishna has written, go alone in silence. If you go alone in silence, it will show not one mirror. Full mirror palace of mirrors. Now at least you are there. Oh, there are other people like me suffering. Good. When you go in silence alone, you are the only one who is suffering. You look out of the window, look, everybody is enjoying their life. And I am in silence. Why? Happens, huh? For me, first 2-3 days are always difficult. Not emotionally much for me, but physically. Just to slow down that pace. And that's why from tomorrow, all of you are doing fantastic with the pace of walking and eating and all that. But whatever emotion is coming up, let it come up. Huh? Let it come. Why hide again? Why repress? We are here for experimentation. So experiment. Okay, so I will suspend the silence for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Anybody wants to say anything? Warm up your jaw. Because as I said, really, first day it's all nice and it's so exciting. Oh, I'm in silence. Second day, and for some of you who've already been in silence before, already dived in, it has started because mind doesn't like it. You see, till day before yesterday, you were driving your car in fourth gear. Now suddenly first gear. Engine doesn't like it. You have not dropped the gears. You have straight away gone in first gear. Engine will create trouble. That's why you have to be there, ready. Let's see what dreams you have tonight. Because it will affect everything. I'm not conditioning your mind to have some, what is that? Unicorn, and you are a fairy, pink elephant. I'm not conditioning your dream, but it affects everything. The general level of fatigue. And you don't, then the mind will say, we hardly did anything, we were just sitting, we were just listening. There was no activity as such, you were not running around. But it's different. It's all that tightness that the muscles have stored in, more than the muscles, the mind, the glands. Our adrenal was working on the fourth gear till day before. Now suddenly the adrenal is saying, till day before yesterday my production capacity was 100 gallons. Now suddenly you want me to deliver 2 gallons. So it will have its effect. So anybody wants to share anything? I mean proper sharing, not just because you want to speak something, say something. Okay, so I have switched off my audio, so you can